It is always a great pleasure for me to come here. I have so many friends here, and I look forward to having so many more friends, divine friends in God and in God's consciousness. So as Blazy was saying, I've been traveling quite a bit. It seems to be one of the themes of this incarnation for me. It's very strange at the moment because our astrologer told me a long time ago that just in this time I would be entering the Mahadasha of Ketu along with my sister Bhajana. We're both in our Ketu Dasha, which is a period of time usually of withdrawal and of deepening, of seclusion, of tranquility, and so forth. And yet for us, this is what our Ketu Dasha is looking like, which is continued service to God and gurus through all of you. But let me say that we receive through you the blessings of God and gurus as much as you feel that you are receiving blessings through us. So from my travels, I'd like to share with you a little very common banal experience that I just had in Kerala. And a thought came to my mind of how symbolic this experience is. Kerala, as you well know, has a lot of coastline, and we go to an Ayurvedic resort every year, and we take groups of people there for a retreat that's based in yoga meditation and in Ayurveda. And each year, Bhajana joins, and there's another teacher from Italy, and we have a very nice time. And one of the experiences is to enjoy the sea and to walk along the beach. And I do that every morning. We get up and energize very early because it gets very hot. And before it gets too terribly hot, before breakfast, after meditation, go out and walk along the beach. I like to run, and we get very close to the water, actually walking through the water. Well, the waves this year, and actually every year in that part of Kerala, are quite strong. And so they come crashing, onto the beach. And we like to walk through the waters because it's a bit too turbulent to go inside, but that way we kind of get our swim in, our bath, So we're walking, or I'm running along the beach, and some of the waves are really crashing. And they're very strong, and they pound down onto the beach and just kind of overwhelm us. And I recognized that there were 4 different ways that I was responding to these waves. And one way is when the big crashing wave would come, I would run away. I'd just run up the beach so I wouldn't get taken by it. The second way I responded to the waves was to jump over them, because I was running, so I had a little spring, in my step. And if the wave wasn't too big, coming up onto the shore, I would just kind of hop, over it and just keep going. And that was nice as well. Sometimes the waves were quite high, and they would surprise you, and you weren't ready for it, and there you were in the midst of the water. And I found that, you could just trudge through it. Keep going, try not to lose your momentum, and just go through. And that was also a very good experience. It's actually very good for the muscles and so forth. It's even an aspect of physical therapy. When I broke my foot some years ago, I had therapy in the water, and that was part of it, was using the resistance of the water to push through. Sometimes those waves were so strong and the water was so high, and one wave would come and another would come right after it, and I found it just be surrounded by the water pulling in all directions. And the only thing I could do at that time was just stand still and let it finish. Because it came up on the shore and it was going to go back. No matter what I did or didn't do. So I would just stand there and let it pass. And in experiencing this, I enjoyed it very much. And I thought how exactly this is that we respond to the waves of circumstances, the waves of challenges and trials that come in our lives. And of course they do. It's, when you go to the ocean, you expect there to be waves, right? I mean, that's part of the experience. You don't want a perfectly smooth sea. I remember in a letter that Master wrote to one of his disciples, a little phrase that's always stayed with me. And she was telling him and complaining a bit about trials that she was going through, a kind of saying that, God was not being just with her. It was a bit too much. And in this phrase that he wrote, he said, "A smooth life is not a victorious life." And that's something, it's good for us to remember that. Because life, when we come to it and we incarnate here, our soul expects that there's going to be waves and they're going to come crashing down, and some of them are going to be more powerful and taller than others, and that's part of it. And a smooth life, a life without challenge, a life without difficulties and tests is not a victorious life. It's just like a sports person who's in competition. And if he wants an easy life, he will play against people who have less ability, but never grows, never becomes a champion in that way. There's is anybody interested in tennis? Is anybody following tennis? 1, 2, 3. Okay. There's this young American girl. Have you heard about her? I think her name is Coco. She's 15 years old. Okay. And she's on the international circuit. And just recently she beat Venus Williams, and she beat Serena Williams, and there she is. I mean, she's 15 years old and she's playing against the great ones. Now, she doesn't always win, but she's out there and she's putting herself against the big ones because she knows that that's what makes a champion. And that's what God is expecting from us, that we be spiritual champions, that we be champions of life. So as we wake up each day, let's expect and not be surprised about the waves that are going to come. Because after we learn something, just like many of you here are learning your Ananda Yoga, you spend so much time learning, then what happens? Quizzes and exams. And in those exams, we see what we've learned and what we haven't learned. And then we realize from what we haven't yet accomplished that there's more to do, and we go on. If there were no tests, we would never know how much we've actually learned in our lives. So waves are real important. They're part of the ocean, they're part of our life. And there are 4 ways, actually a 5th way that I didn't experience. So I'll start with the 5th way. So one way of relating to the waves in our life is to complain about them. And that really doesn't get us anywhere because it doesn't change the ocean. And the ocean's going to have its rhythms, its waves. Our life has its waves. And they're going to come They're the waves of karma that are coming to us. And sometimes they're karmic bombs and just explode like a very big wave and spray all over us. And so there's no use complaining. One of the things that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita is that this wisdom that he is giving to Arjuna cannot be understood by those of the carping spirit. So when we complain about something, we're not receiving. We're not in tune with the opportunities that life is giving us. We just heard in the reading, those who received him gave he the power to become sons of God. Well, when we read that teaching in the Bible, we would say, oh, well, if God comes knocking at my door, of course I would receive him. Clearly, if I hear the knock, I'm going to open the doors and welcome him into my life. Well, when was the last time God knocked on your door? Every day. And that coming into our lives, the receiving of God, is receiving the waves and the challenges that life brings us. That's God knocking on our door and giving us the chance to come closer, to show our stuff, to put into practice what we've been hearing and studying and learning, to see if we actually have. So let's cancel that from the way of meeting our life's waves. It's just not complain and just accept. In this morning's class, we were talking about acceptance and the importance of acceptance. And one of Swami Kriyananda's affirmations in his book, Affirmations for Self-Healing, we just heard the affirmation about work. Well, there's another affirmation about acceptance, and it is, I accept with calm impartiality everything that comes my way. Something in my heart, centered in my heart, I am not conditioned by any outward experience. So I accept with calm impartiality everything that comes my way. And when we do, then we have the chance to grow. So let's eliminate from our life complaining. It doesn't get us anywhere, and it certainly doesn't bring us closer to our higher self. So how can we meet the waves of challenges in our life? We can run away from them, okay? Because sometimes I don't want to get wet, just don't want to get touched by these difficulties. They're not mine, so we run away. And we know that that doesn't work, because we can run away and maybe this time not get touched by something, but it's going to come again. Those waves are cyclic. And if there's something that life wants to teach us, it's not going to be discouraged by our running away from it. So Swami Kriyananda tells the story, it's written in the Path, about one of the co-disciples. And have you seen the movie The Answer? Has anybody seen that movie? Okay, many of you have, almost all. Well, do you remember one of Norman is a good friend of Swami in the movie? He's the big guy, the one who, so you know who he is. And it actually happens, as Swami writes about it, that later on, Norman gets discouraged. And he gets discouraged because he's irritated by especially one of the other disciples. And he decides to leave, to run away. And so he leaves the ashram and he goes back to a so-called normal life. And a year passes and he comes back to find his friends. And they say, well, Norman, how are you? How has it been? And Norman says, remember how I couldn't stand Jerry when I was living here? Well, the place that I'm working right now, there's 4 people exactly like Jerry. That we can't run away from it. We can't. So it's better just to face it with the faith that if life is bringing a circumstance to my life right now, it is intelligent and merciful, and it's coming at exactly the right time. Because our karmic tests come to us when we are able to meet them, even though we don't recognize our ability. We might think that we aren't ready, but God knows that we are. And we have to find the strength. So don't run away from the waves. Don't worry about getting your feet wet, your clothes wet. After being on the beach every day, went up to breakfast and just would get to breakfast dripping wet every day. So let's just let life bathe us, and make us wet. And let's just get in there, get into the ocean. Okay, another way when these challenges come is to jump over them. And what does that mean? Whenever a wave comes in our life, a karmic boomerang, it's coming with a certain level of energy. It's the level of energy that has been created by our past actions, and it has a charge. It has a karmic, energetic charge. And if our energetic charge at that moment is greater, we just jump over the test. Mm-hmm. So what does that mean? That we need to keep our energy up. Because the waves are going to come, and not every one of them needs to knock us down. Okay? Because we have the strength to go over it. Many times, let me see if I can think of a situation. In the community, perhaps there would be some very difficult situation which we couldn't solve. It seemed like one of these no way out of a particular situation. And we would go to talk with Swami. I'll give you an example. In 1976, and those of you who have seen the movie Finding Happiness might remember this, there was a forest fire that came to Ananda village, and it was a very, very big one. Perhaps in the last year you've read about the tremendous fires that there have been in California, also in Australia recently. And this forest fire destroyed about 2/3 of our property and destroyed almost every single one of our houses. So there we were, faced with the situation, and some people ran away from the wave. They left, and said, I didn't come here to have my house and all of my possessions destroyed, and they left. And others who stayed, we were trying to deal with, well, how do we rebuild? Where do we find the resources? Where do we find the strength? And we were just like in this vortex of energy that didn't seem to have any great solutions. And we go to Swami, and what does Swami say to us? He says, let's go out, take 14 people, travel around the country, and do a national tour. And we'll call it Joy is Within You. And we thought, Swami, the community's just been destroyed, and joy's somewhere within us, but we need people here. We need to rebuild. We need to figure this out. He said, no, let's go on tour. And so we went on a 3-month tour, taking 3 vehicles, 14 people, including our singing group. Swami gave classes. Joy is Within You. We gave seminars. We cooked for people and so forth. We just put out a huge amount of energy. So what was Swami saying to us? Well, the fire came, it had its energy, it did what it did. We needed to respond to it with a greater energy and with opening up, with a receptivity. And so we did. We went out and created this magnetic vortex of energy and came back. We were able to face the situation, and many people came, many people heard about Ananda and Master, and actually that was the beginning of the next phase of Ananda's development. So let's keep our energy up so that when the karmic waves come to us in our lives, we're ready. We're bigger than the wave. If we're not, if we let our energy drop down, the wave will take us, So that's the second way. The third way, was walking through the wave. And sometimes that's just what we need to do with the tests in life. We need to persevere. We need to not be discouraged, not give up, not avoid it, but just keep going forward. Even though it may seem that we're not getting anywhere because we're shackled, by this karmic bomb or shattered by it. But we just keep going one step at a time. That dream of Master that perhaps you all know very well, Swami's written about it in The Path, where he's in a marketplace and there's this high mountain, and he sees people looking up to the top of the high mountain where there's a beautiful city and a beautiful palace. And each person looks up longingly and then hangs his head down, turns around, shakes his head and says, no, it's too high. And so Master in the dream, he turns around, he looks up the mountain, he sees the palace on the top, and the same thought comes to him. No, it's too high. I'll never get there. And at that moment, another thought comes in his mind. It might be high. It might be far away. It might take a lot of energy, but I can put one foot in front of the other. And eventually, I'll get there. Banat, banat, banjai. Okay? So that's the third way, the banat, banjai way of meeting the tests in our life. And the last way, what was the last way? Standing just to be centered in yourself, knowing that what comes is going to go, that life is a dream, and that it will pass, no matter how hard, how difficult, how unreasonable, how unjustified, how difficult something seems. It's not going to last forever. It's going to go. And instead of getting all excited about it, elated or depressed or, whatever it is, we just stand in our center and let it pass. And there's a beautiful chant I've asked Bharat to play, if you would, and I think you can find it in your books. And this is the very good advice of Saint Teresa of Avila, and it's called Teresa's Admonition. Can you find the page that it's on? Saint Teresa's, okay? It's on page 24, and this is often the best way to meet the tests of our lives. And let's listen and really absorb the advice of this great saint. Let nothing disturb you, nothing affright you. All things will pass, but God changes not. Patient endurance. Patient endurance
brings you to victory.
Brings you to victory. Patient endurance, that stillness brings you to victory. Once you have God, you'll want nothing else.